Dear listeners of The Laundry, welcome back to the first episode of the year. So when you think about a strategic competitive advantage in the financial and fintech world, the first thing to come to mind isn't necessarily compliance programs. From an external perspective, the compliance function can appear to be a cost center with no direct revenue generating capabilities. However, compliance can become a revenue driver and a driving force for growth if the business invests in compliance activities and improve customer satisfaction, boost customer loyalty, or reduce the chances of litigation. And in this episode, we are exploring this topic with today's guest, Silke Øverby, Head of Risk and Compliance at Vipps MobilePay, the largest payment company in the Nordics. And this topic on how to turn compliance into a driving force for growth is something I know that you are passionate about. I'm so looking forward to exploring it with you. So welcome to The Laundry.
Thank you so much for having me. Transforming compliance from a regulatory hassle to a competitive advantage is one of my favorite topics to talk about. So I'm really looking forward to that.
That's perfect. And you are doing it in Vipps MobilePay, the newly merged entity, which is huge. You have 11 million individuals, 400,000 merchants, and handle almost 1 billion transactions every year. That's a huge customer base to manage. So, Silke, to get us kicked off, in your words, how would you describe the role of risk and compliance, how that role plays within Vipps MobilePay, and how does it differ from a more traditional banking institution?
Working risk-based should be at the core of any financial institution. So like this, you could say we are just like any other bank, right? But we try to take it to the next level. We have a clearly defined goal for risk and compliance, and our ambition is to use the risk-based approach to generate a competitive advantage by finding the right balance between simplification and risk and compliance, so the regulatory compliance especially. For example, it's not that difficult to build a completely compliant merchant onboarding flow, right? It's not very difficult to build a very user-friendly and agile merchant onboarding flow either. The art form is to do both things at the same time. So that's what we're trying to master. And how do we get there? Well, we have defined 3 success criteria. The first one I talk constantly about, is our early bird approach.
Okay, that sounds super interesting.
Yes, it's basically an invitation to to everyone in the organization to invite risk and compliance early in all the processes. I also every now and then tell my colleagues, give me a chance to say yes instead of no. Ask me early. And then the product managers will say, Silke never says yes. She says, yes, but. So unconditional yeses are not happening that often, but it's better than a no. And my experience, and I have a lot of experience, I'm one of the last Vipps dinosaurs living in the organization. So my experience is the later you involve risk and compliance, the higher the no ratio will be. So early bird approach, that's one of the principles. The next one is taking the risk-based approach seriously. Risk-based prioritization does not only mean to decide in what order to do things, but what are the most important issues? What are the biggest risks? And what are we going not to do at all? That's when really risk-based comes in. So not just the order, but decide what are we going to do, what are we not going to do. And last but not least, our ambition is to reduce the risk and compliance hassle for the organization. And how are we doing that? Well, we are combining all our second line functions in one unit. So risk management, internal control, information security, PSD2, AML, GDPR. There is an endless supply of 3 and 4 letter abbreviations here. So everything compliant in one unit. We want to avoid a situation where a product manager or tech lead is confronted on a Monday with risk, saying, now let's do a risk assessment. On Tuesday, information security is coming along and say, how is your threat picture looking like? And then on Tuesday we already had Thursday. On Thursday, then the DPO is coming and say, hey, did you DPIA on your product? We want to align, we want to work together, because in the end, to also the management and the board, does it really happen? Which of the 3 letter or 4 letters, PSD2, which of the 3 or 4 letters abbreviations are the main risk driver? the total risk picture and the total control is important. And that's why we combine everything and try to always look at the holistic risk picture for a product, for a customer segment, but also for Vipps and MobilePay in a total.
Oh, that's super interesting. Do you think it's a new trend to do it that way? Are you leading on? Do you see more like other mobile payments companies or other financial institutions doing it in that way? Or are you more unique in your approach?
I would say it's a typical startup way to do it. They most likely do it out of necessity. I mean, we did before. We didn't have that many people. So risk and compliance, once way back was a one-woman show. So we didn't have very many other chances than doing it that way. And then the big question is, when you grow, what is scalable? And of course, we get more subject matter experts, but that doesn't mean we have to fragment the complete organization. And as I said, having all this regulatory hassle with dividing them into subjects that has to be treated separately and lose the holistic point of view.
So there's so many follow-up questions to that I want to answer, but let's start with, it sounds really pragmatic what you're doing, and how do you balance this pragmatism with, traditionally, or KYC, compliance, AML, it's a very slow-moving, people-intensive process. How do you get that balancing act right?
Yes, one very important ingredient is, again, the early bird approach. So being involved early, but it's combined with a curiosity from our side. I mean, yes, we are the second line. Old-fashioned approach is second line of defense. I don't like that one, so I prefer the 3 lines model without the defense. But yes, we are the second line. So yes, of course, we are a control function, but we are really, really curious to understand how do the business models work, what is typical for our customer segments, how is our technology working? Because only if you have that understanding of the value chain, of the competitive landscape, in addition to the regulatory landscape, you are able to be a real sparring partner, an advisor for the business side. And that's one of the demands I have to my team, to always keep this curiosity alive, to really be curious when we're meeting our product teams, our tech teams, our customer teams, learning how they're doing things, why they're doing that, and trying to explain it also start with the why on our side. Why do we think what they're doing is not the best option? Why do we want them to change something? And only to have the argument, yes, because we will get a fine if we don't do that, is not always the best one. But telling people that what we are doing is actually ensuring the trust people have in Vipps and MobilePay. I mean, prudent business operations is one of these examples. It's in the laws and regulations, but it's just common sense. Who would trust us with the money if we wouldn't operate our business prudently, if we wouldn't protect and secure their money, their personal data, and so on? So a lot of that is a no-brainer if you think half a second about, and people want to do the right thing. You just every now and then have to discuss with them what the right thing is in this situation.
Yeah. And true. And also, I just thought of it, Vipps was the number one brand in Norway and has a high level of trust. And yes, you are right. It's a very trustworthy brand, and seems like the work you guys are doing on compliance really goes in hand to hand with that. And you guys have that full overview. But yeah, you did mention the business side, and the topic is how to turn compliance into a competitive advantage. How have you guys, have you faced any challenges along the way? How has it been developing this? You've been there from the start of Vipps Dinosaur. What challenges have you met along the way, and how have you been able to support that tremendous growth that you've had?
One of the biggest challenges are shortcuts. A shortcut might be the best idea you had, especially when you're trying to test the product, see if something is a good market fit and so on. So we develop everything in something we call the loop. So where we go from experimenting to verifying that it works to scaling. And there the problem is in the experiment phase. Shortcuts have to be taken because you have to limit how much you put into development of new processes and so on. But sooner or later, these shortcuts will prevent you from scaling. and finding that sweet spot where balance again. I'm the queen of balance. Not in real life. I mean, you should see me in yoga. I'm a menace for everyone around me, but in business world, I'm the queen of balance. So it's the balance between the short time to market and the shortcut to get you going, and when do we have to start the scaling, and then you have to stop thinking shortcuts and you have to think much more about lean processes. Also, manpower is one of those. Very often the fastest way to start with a new product is that I just throw a lot of manpower on it, right? I mean, people having to fix things in the background, as long as the customer isn't affected and doesn't see that there is actually someone actually manually moving the bits and bytes. Who cares? We have to put in some extra work and some long evenings, but that's what we are prepared to do. But the day comes when that will actually stop you from taking that product up the scale, and then you went too far with the shortcut. So that's one of the things I would say is really important when you're growing, both in the size of the company, the organization, number of employees, but also with the products, the technology, basically processes, everything. When you multiply the number of users, the number of merchants, the number of markets, the complexity increases, and then you don't want to have a lot of legacy spaghetti, I call it. All the shortcuts together from the legacy spaghetti.
Yeah. Another interesting question is KPIs. So what kind of KPIs does your team measure against? Do compliance have their own KPIs? Like how does that work for you?
Here we took a shortcut. A compliance-approved shortcut. No, we define risk and compliance as a business enabling function. We are there to support the business. So basically, Vipps MobilePay's goals and objectives are our goals and objectives. So we don't have very many risk and compliance related KPIs. It's different for the more operational units that are not part of my organization, but of the first line, so financial crime and so on. So they, of course, have very clear KPIs, but not our team, not a risk and compliance team.
Yeah, that's as you said, it's a business enabler. So those are, very to follow those metrics, I guess, are the most important. Do you have any big successes your risk and compliance team have achieved over the last few years? Any particular moments that come to mind?
Well, compliance nerd alert. Now it really gets really nerdy. No, but there's one thing. I'm not sure if we were arrogant or naive. I would do it again. I'm not sure if the developers would do it again together with me, setting the business requirements, but we built actually our own electronic transaction monitoring system from scratch. That was a lot of long evenings, and especially fulfilling all the requirements with testing and traceability and everything. It's really quite a big task we took there, but the end result speaks for itself, because now we are able to see the holistic customer picture. We see, for example, end users and merchants combined. We can, with our filters, our scenarios in electronic transaction monitoring, especially when we start combining it with machine learning and the first rise of artificial intelligence now, they are so much more powerful. So I really think it was worthwhile, all the time and sweat and tears we invested. But as I said, that's a really nerdy thing to point out, most likely.
I think that's a great story, and amazing to hear that you were able to build that with such great results. So big congrats on that. Another one is, it's similar to topics we've touched upon, but how do you ensure that your team remains as agile as it seems and responds quickly to changes in the regulatory environment? Because now it seems that regulations change all the time, whereas IT systems not necessarily do. So how do you guys stay on top of everything?
Yes, there the balance comes in again. So it's on the one hand, I of course expect anyone working in the risk and compliance team to be a subject matter expert, and especially following regulatory trends. That's a given. We always have very good help from our legal department here, who also will come up and alert us if there is something we should have a closer look at. The other thing is, as I mentioned, the deep understanding of our own business models, because that's where compliance really comes in. It's not enough to just understand the regulatory landscape or the changes in the regulatory picture. You have to be able to translate them. And with translate, I don't only mean to rewrite all the rules and regulations in a more Vippsified, mobileified, that doesn't work. We have to find something new here, a language, but it's really to translate it. What does it mean for our business? How do we, with the technology we have, and that's where the technology understanding also comes in, with the processes we have, how do we manage that we comply with these rules and regulations? So that's what we in compliance really do. We are following the regulatory side, but we are really translators, and I expect people to be able to be part of the solution. That's what I always say. Not being part of a control unit that owns the findings. I want risk and compliance to be part of the solution. And then we are doing it right. And we have to challenge ourselves all the time. And every now and then also we get feedback that now I really acted like a bank compliance department. And the answer is, well, that's... This time we had to be a little bit more like a bank and a little bit less like Vipps MobilePay. So that happens as well.
Okay, that's interesting. So have any, or what sort of things or strategies or technologies you guys have implemented or that has improved the customer experience? Like, is there any sort of things you've seen that links directly from, okay, this is what we've done to how the customers experience Vipps MobilePay?
I'm mostly happy if we at least don't make the customer experience worse. Okay. So let's start there, right? I mean, Vipps MobilePay really stands for simplification and smooth customer experience. And what we are doing is enabling the business to do that in a compliant way. But of course, there are a lot of process optimization possibilities also with third-party providers like Strise, for example, where we really optimize the product flow, but or the process flow. Usually, I would assume the customers don't realize that at all. They only would realize if it doesn't work. So that's the ungrateful part of working in compliance. As long as you're doing a great job, no one is realizing anything. The moment you have a major fuck up, then it's either out in the media or you get a lot of customer complaints, or in the worst case, you get some fines. So you only can lose.
You have recently merged. We talked about that in the intro. How has it been to try to merge two different, I can imagine, cultures and also compliance cultures? How's that been like?
Oh, loaded question. No. On the surface, Vipps and MobilePay look totally alike, right? Two strong brands standing for simplification and really good user experiences. Mobile payments wallet, offering peer-to-peer payments, merchant payments. I mean, where's the difference, you might think? When you look under the hood, everything is different. Different business models, different technology. Even in how we sort our payments is totally different. Four-parts versus three-party model. So stuff that's really nerdy as well. So there are a lot of difference, and also culture-wise, the difference was there. Of course, I mean, it's like, imagine you're moving in with a new boyfriend, and then one of you guys is some kind of adorable, chaotic person, never showing up to the right time for dinner. Tax declaration is done 5 minutes before the deadline, but usually works out, something like that. And the other person sorts books alphabetically in the bookshelf and is keeping all the receipts for purchases in a folder in case there's a warranty issue or whatever. So that's a little bit what we had. And you have two choices then. Either you give up on each other or you actually embrace it as a learning experience. Best of two worlds comes to my mind now. And I would say we are still in the learning curve. Of course, Vipps has to get more structured. Oh, now I said but we need to learn. I mean, MobilePay has all this experience from before. They have been a multinational company before the merger. They had Denmark and Finland with customers there. They had the branch office in Lithuania, while Vipps was Norwegian only. Vipps has we had our advantages as well. So it's still trying to combine these models, but it's mostly peacefully. So yeah. So we are on a learning journey together, I would put it like that.
It must be exciting also to be able to create this Nordic payment giant that can compete on a more European and global scale as well.
It is a new challenge, and it is definitely exciting to think about where else it might take us. Yes, because if it works in the Nordics, why not in the rest of Europe? So that's a really... But let's focus on the Nordics first.
Yeah. And talking about compliance and culture, a topic that we have covered in the laundry before quite extensively is, the importance of tone from the top. That the top management's, how they speak about compliance, that matters a lot on how it trickles down into the organization. And how does the Vipps MobilePay team, that management team that you sit in, how do you guys show your support and the importance of compliance to the rest of the organization?
The most important part is that all my colleagues in the leadership team, they're really good in inviting us in. And that has to start on the top, right? If risk and compliance are treated almost like an external auditor, where everyone is a little bit fearing that they are coming tomorrow and want to look into all your books, that's then something that is filtering down. But I never experienced anything like that. So it's always this partnership, this also balanced together. They give us the chance to learn about the business models, about our customer segments. I mean, we wouldn't be nothing without the business. On the other side, the business side also would have a problem without compliance, because then we most likely would lose our license and be shut down sooner or later. So we need each other. And I think that's an understanding that is really there, and how to make a partnership out of that, and not a controller and a controllee.
Yeah, that's so I keep coming back to this, but so you talk about this partnership with the business side. How in the day-to-day do you work then with the business side? Is it the head of sales that you work closely with, or just trying to get like a picture here, and also maybe some tips for other second line who maybe should work closer with the business side?
One thing is we are using Slack, for example, as a communication tool, and there is an open risk and compliance channel. We even have a risk and compliance meme channel where we are making fun out of ourselves, and now all the company has adopted that one. So it started as a nerd thing, and now it's not that nerdy anymore. So, but it's still funny. It's the open communication channel that is always there, and yes. We work as a team, we work both top down. So we start, for example, at least quarterly, all the risk owners. And for me, the risk owners, they always start in the leadership team, and they have then delegated some of the responsibility to the next level and so on. So we insist, at least on a quarterly basis, to go through the risk picture with them, to discuss us through that, to be open to, let's have a better talk about that one, what that really means for us. Also trying to help them to see the complete picture, avoiding that we start developing into silos, the user silo and the merchant silo and so on. That's exactly what we do not want to have, working cross-functional. So I'm working with everything from the sales teams, also with the head of sales, of course, product managers, tech leads, engineering managers, our customer service. So we are not discriminating. Whoever asks for help will get help, and if they don't ask for help, we will sooner or later discover it, latest with the next quarter. And then we will actually recommend a little bit more strongly that maybe they should talk to us.
Yeah, that's interesting. And you talked, each quarter, sit down, give an outlook of the challenges and the risks ahead. If you look now at 2023, what are sort of the main challenges for you guys at risk and compliance? What are you focused on? What are some of the bottlenecks you're trying to solve?
The bottlenecks are always the whole capacity question, especially do I need more manpower? Should I invest more in technology? The whole ethical dilemma around automated decision making, machine learning, artificial intelligence and everything. So that's one of the big bottlenecks, especially because this expertise is rare as well. So that's one of the areas where we have to look deeper, and we'll have to investigate, finding out what do we want to do. Another area is the supply chain management, third-party providers, and so on. I mean, the whole geopolitical landscape is changing, has been changing since last year, also before that. It's no secret that Vipps is cloud-based, and all the cloud suppliers, of course, have support personnel around the world. So what risk is that? What risk are we exposed to here? How can we make sure that no support personnel from countries where we think the country risk is too high has access and so on? So a lot of the third-party management, regulatory compliance there, that will be a real bottleneck. Also might turn to that you, for example, have to say, we can't work with that supplier anymore, have to change. And then I'm afraid that we also will have to look more into the financial crime. I mean, everyone knows that when the macroeconomic goes down, the crime goes up. That's not new. Phishing has been a trend for years, but what we see, and that is worrying me, is, how do I call that? Crime as a service, maybe? Yeah. Before, you had to have some knowledge about how to do a phishing attack, for example. But now there are all these phishing kits out there. So you can build up as a criminal organization these big networks of mules out there. They don't have to be highly trained. You just need someone who is having basic knowledge. And that's worrying me. I don't like that as a risk manager and compliance manager.
Yeah, so are there, talking about that, are there any sort of other, what are your main sort of worries of the criminals taking advantage of Vipps MobilePay in terms of, like, where do you see the biggest risks there? I saw recently there was a case in Denmark with over 200 people arrested in a money mule network and so forth. Is that one of the areas that you worry about? That's one of the areas, and otherwise, it's, as I said, if you manage to take over the Vipps identity of a person, that's identity theft. I mean, that's you can do quite a lot with the Vipps account of someone else. So that, and it goes right on the core of being a trustworthy payment service, of course. So that is very important for us to make sure that every identity we have out there, all 4 million of them we have in Norway, 11 million we have on the Nordic scale, they are secured without increasing the level of hassle that you have to log in with Bank ID all the time, something like that. So it's again a balance question. How do I balance the security I need to have a trustworthy payment service with the user friendliness and the easiness to use as the user expects? And what's been some of the worst breaches that you've seen for mobile payments in your career? Not necessarily Vipps, but maybe somewhere else. It's not a breach per se, but what is causing very much frustration on our side is that we see a lot of companies with business models that should be regulated because, for example, they accept payments on behalf of others and then they're paying out again, but they are not. So they are kind of operating in a gray zone, and they are a constant challenge for us because then we don't know what to do with that kind of merchant customer especially. Do we accept the indirect compliance risk, AML risk we have, because we basically don't see where the money ends up? We don't like that, but then you have to identify them first. So that's one of the constant sources of frustration in our daily work. Finding them, deciding what to do, what not to do. Is it such a model? Is it not? Yeah, that's there are a lot of gray zones there. Interesting. Any other areas on the merchant side? Because on the corporate side that you see as a challenge, that's also a topic that we've covered a bit before here. One of the things that I think is most difficult to control is the complete donation sector. I mean, there are, of course, a lot of great organizations. They're really doing a great work collecting money, helping others and so on. And then there are, unfortunately, this black sheep in between. And here the transaction patterns also are alike. I mean, also because the whole model is that you fool the giver, the donator, right? So of course the transaction patterns are alike, but that's a real hassle as well to work because I think it's actually part of our social responsibility to support donations and to make sure, like the big TV action we have in Norway every year, we are very important. That's a really important part of what we are working with. So we really want to support all of these organizations to collect the money as easily and as cheaply as possible. But on the other hand, we really have to make sure that we find out who is actually not doing what they say they do. In the worst case, they do some
type of best case it's money laundering, worst case it's terror financing, right? So it's really, that's a really important sector for us, and it's at the same time it's one of the most high risk sectors where you can operate.
Again, back to the outlook of 2023, maybe not on a Vipps MobilePay specific, looking at it through a Vipps MobilePay specific lens, but in general in the compliance world, what are some of the big trends that you see for 2023?
Well, it is the constantly changing regulatory landscape, of course. Everything from the first talks of PSD3. It's like, we are still busy with PSD2, but PSD3 is coming for sure sooner or later, to, of course, also new trends in KYC, AML, and otherwise it's really the one of the topics I was a little bit into before, the whole automized decision-making. And all these ethical dilemmas around that. I think that will be a problem for not only banks, all kind of payment institutions, especially fintechs, because they may be tending a little bit more towards the automated decisions. Traditional bank maybe would escalate earlier to manual decision handling, and the flow in between. I mean, finding out where is the automated process really the best one to make a decision, and where do I need the, in German we say Fingerspitzengefühl. How do you translate that into English now? But it's really to have the stomach feeling about here's something fishy. That's where, I mean, the machine won't give you that. They won't tell you, I think something was fishy here, let's look a little bit closer. They need some patterns.
So what's your stance on this in Vipps MobilePay? What route have you guys chosen in this?
We are experimenting with the automated decision making. Of course, it helps to have better and leaner processes. So it's basically a no-brainer. But we are careful about how to introduce it. So usually when we start with something like that, we do a really huge sample base. Every now and then we even in the beginning almost work parallel, like letting the team work and the machine work, and then we see if we end up with the same conclusions, things like that. And then there is also some of our scenarios, they're just so high risk. Those we would never escalate it into a machine learning decision-making process, but those we will always handle manually, for example.
And as you said, new fintechs, they might be leaning more towards the automation route because, merchant onboarding and the backlog, it's a constant problem. What tips would you give to, new companies starting out in the mobile payment space right now and building their compliance programs from scratch?
Embrace, especially in Norway, embrace the technology that is there. I mean, we are in a kind of luxury situation because we have a lot of trustworthy data sources, like the Brønnøysund register, like a Strise report. So you can have, you can get a lot of decision that you can feed into your automized decision-making process, and then simply, depending on your risk appetite, find out where is the point where you have to escalate out of the automatic decision-making and where you have to go over to human handling. And if you find the balance, the sweet spot there, then you're set up to, then you have a winning solution most likely.
And back to tips and tricks. What do you think is the most important skill set that a compliance professional should possess?
I can tell you what I'm looking for when I hire people.
Yes,
so everyone who wants to wants to apply at a Vipps position now follow what I'm saying. No, I'm just kidding. No, but it's the curiosity, the willingness to learn, to actually never stop learning, the understanding that regulatory compliance knowledge and expertise is not enough, that you also need to combine it with the business insights, with the technology understanding, because otherwise you are a very theoretically operating compliance officer who will never understand what it means for the business side. And last but not least, working with compliance for me means you work a lot with frameworks and policies and standards and controls. That's part of our daily job, right? But you have to understand really at the end of the day, you're working with people. Because all these frameworks, they are all only there to make sure that everyone is behaving in the way we want them to behave. So it's, for me, it's like when you are at one of these nice park or green areas, right? You always see that some architect had some really nice design of all the path and everything. And then you always see this mud path right through the grass. And that's just, for me, that's common. I mean, that's just a typical human behavior. So if you as a compliance officer only are the architect to make all these really nice pathways, but you never expect that someone is actually taking the shortest way from A to B, then you failed. So you have to find out, can we accept that people are going through the mud and then they get their feet a little bit dirty and that's a risk we accept? Is there a landmine there? Then maybe they stop walking there. If I put a landmine, that's the framework, by the way, then I put a landmine sign there and then they most likely will find a new way. But anyways, not that one. Or is it, or do I have a kind of audience here who simply will stop doing that if I tell them, oh, you're not allowed to do that? I mean, every now and then we don't have that many people in Vipps, but some people, maybe in some banks it works if you simply say don't do that and then don't do it. I don't know, but it's about behavior, people. That's really your customer. So the organization is that back to the enabling function. So understanding that we are not a control function, we are an enabling function, and then we are good to go.
That's actually, that was a very good image of it, or the metaphor of it. I like that one. And I see that we have to wrap up, but I have a final question, and that is, what is the best thing about working in compliance?
Being allowed to be a besserwisser all day. German besserwisser, even worse.
I mean, I really enjoyed our conversation, Silke. I would love to have you back on the laundry for another topic, for another episode, but thank you so much for coming. It's been great.
This has been real fun, so thank you very much for having me.